You know how all of these law of attraction teachings, self-improvement doctrines tell you that you can make all of your desires come true? Anything you can desire, you can have? Well, I hate to spoil the party, but I'm telling you the exact opposite here. You cannot make your desires come true. You cannot have what you desire. I'm sorry to spoil the party, because desire, precisely desire, implies lack. You cannot have something that you feel you lack. If you desire it, it implies that you don't have it. So the statement that you can have anything you desire is false. Well, you can have it, but not from within, not legitimately, not non-criminally. Which is why anyone proposing that you can have what you desire is either a con man or doesn't understand how things work. You can have what you believe. You can have what you are willing to do something about. Believe or do something about, or both combined. Believe and do something about. That you can have. So one of the main teachings in reality creation coaching in the last 30 years, I developed this technique about 30 years ago. It's one of my oldest, but it's still as effective as it was 30 years ago. It's called From Desire to Belief, or converting fantasy into reality, or shifting from wanting to having. And I've put many variations of this one principle out there. So why am I doing another? Because it's so frequently overlooked, and it's highly effective. You just have to use it. The most basic form of this technique is think of something you want, maybe something that's bothering or troubling you. It's also something you want. So what do you want out of that? And very simply now, instead of wanting it, instead of desiring it, can you imagine already having it? There's a subtle difference between wanting it, desiring it, and feeling you already have it. For how long? Well, maybe for a minute at least, or 3 minutes to really get into it, to change your attitude, your emotional state. You see, wanting is forever a lacking. You're running after it. It's good to want and to desire. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's only the first step. You see, some people say you need to get rid of all your desires, like in Buddhism, get rid of all your desires. That's one way to live, and you might live a good life with that. But there's another way. It's to imagine you already have it. That's another way to get rid of your desires. Rather than suppressing them and pretending you don't have any desires, imagine your desires are already true. That's one way to move from desire to belief. You'll notice one feels like a pull from the chest or solar plexus, like a separation, and the other feels like a relief, it's already done. So be it. Amen. It's done. And if you're religious, you can also give this already done to a higher realm, to heaven, to your Creator, which makes it even more done, all taken care of by the universal manager. To get this feeling of, it's all done, it's all good. That is true letting go and letting the field of energy that you're surrounded by, that you've just programmed, take care of things. Then you won't have to do quite as much. You'll only have to do, mostly, what you're inspired to do. Now I'll teach you another way of moving from desire to belief. People always used to ask me, if what I visualize manifests, then why aren't my sexual fantasies coming true? Well, I just provided the answer. Sexual fantasy is usually 100% desire-based, and desire is lack. And that's why I don't engage in sexual fantasy. It only generates lack, not only in sex, but in anything. Because I'm constantly projecting desire, desire, desire. That's why on the scale of consciousness, desire isn't that high of a level. It's a motor, it's a beginning. Without desire, you don't strive for anything. We don't want to do without desire. Desire is good, but it's not enough. There needs to be from desire to belief, not just the desire. Do you follow? So think of a fantasy you've had. It could be a sexual fantasy or something else. No judgment from me. And just notice how it's a fantasy. It's labeled a fantasy because you don't even acknowledge it as a potential reality. It's labeled science fiction or fantasy or a sex fantasy. It's already labeled that way. Did you know that science fiction and fantasy movies and books are a substitute for true spirituality, true ability to create reality? It's for people who've lost that ability and now imagine what it would be like to have it. They play games such as Final Fantasy, imagining they are these people and have these skills without actually experiencing any of it. So focus on your fantasy It seems so far away, and just for now, try to let go of desiring that, let go of wanting that, let go of wasting your energy on a fantasy. And now I'd like you to think of something you are 100% certain of. It's not a fantasy at all. Just so you get the difference in feeling, what belief really feels like. What is a fact? For example, if you think the sun is going to go up tomorrow, the sun will rise, what does that feel like? If you think I am speaking to you, I'm pretty certain that I'm speaking to you, what does that feel like? You think this table exists, what does that feel like? You think your laptop exists, what does it feel like? What does certainty feel like? What is something you're certain about? Okay, so you got what fantasy feels like and what certainty feels like. Big difference. You can only manifest what you feel that certainty about, what you feel you already have, what you feel is normal, not what you feel is way, way out there. Oh, that's incredible. The word incredible already implies it's not going to come true because it's incredible, unbelievable. Now, let's experiment with something. Take that feeling of certainty and apply it to the fantasy you had. Be an interesting feeling. Go back to the fantasy and try to apply the same feeling, taking that certainty sense to the fantasy, as if that fantasy were normal, certain, and try to hold that in mind for a while. It's not a fantasy, it's not far away, it's normal. It's a certainty. It's inevitable. Pretty intense, huh? So your so-called fantasy is much more likely to manifest if you feel it as a certainty. I'm not saying that you can manifest all the fantasies you have, and the reason for that, for example, somebody said, I want to be able to fly with my body like the characters in the computer game Final Fantasy. That's not within the human domain. The human domain has certain limitations. I'm not saying you can't fly with your body. You certainly can. But in order to do that, you have to leave your current domain. And that means letting go of and giving up what makes you human. Giving up that body, for example. So be careful what you wish for and manifest within your domain. If you don't manifest within your domain, you're going to attract trouble. A lot of people try to manifest stuff outside of their domain, and they'll achieve it eventually, but then they wonder why so much trouble happens. You know, you try to manifest flying with your body, and suddenly you get a heart attack. Why? Why did I get a heart attack? Well, maybe it's got something to do with what you wanted to manifest. I usually recommend goals and intentions that are neither too realistic nor too unrealistic. That's where a lot of people are. They either think too small or way too big in order to avoid simply thinking big, but within their domain. Because that's what exercises your real power. Choosing high goals, but within your vicinity and domain. Choosing a goal that the horse is already running toward. The trajectory of your life is already going in a certain direction by life purpose, by higher self, and the best goals are the ones that are aligned with that, somewhat realistic, but not too realistic, not thinking small. Do you get what I'm saying here? The balance required. This is common sense. Another way to create this shift is by converting imagination into memory. We'll do that. Imagine something you'd like to manifest. All right. Now, imagine this thing were a memory. Pretend it were a memory, not in front of you, but behind you, as if it already happened some time ago, and you're merely reminiscing on what already happened. It's not in front of you, you're not anticipating it, it's a memory, it's already done. You can remember the events that led up to it, or what happened after it manifested. As if it's all a memory. All right, thank you. Now, if you experienced a sense of relief, you've done it correctly. Because all these desires people have, they create a tension, and that tension is only relieved once the desire is fulfilled. But if you can do that from within, you're no longer dependent on the external manifestation. And regardless of whether it actually manifests or not, the likelihood is higher now that it does, but regardless of whether it does or not, that alone is very empowering. No longer being dependent on external manifestation is so empowering. So if you had that sexual fantasy, you're no longer dependent on it. If it manifests, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. You're no longer dependent on somebody giving you money because you've manifested it within. And people say to me, well, of what use is it to have money within, Fred? It's got to be on my account. And if you say that, you're missing the whole point. You're missing out on all of life. Prosperity is an inner feeling. It is within. And this inner feeling eventually reflects in spin-off side effects. These are just side effects of an inner feeling. A lot of money on your account is just a side effect. It's not the main point. Of what use is all of this money in your account if you're not feeling the prosperity within? Many rich people have found it's of absolutely no use, but only poverty consciousness, poor thinking people disagree with that and think, no, I gotta have the numbers as proof on my account. Well, take care of the inner prosperity first, and eventually it'll reflect on the outside in the form of abundance, in the form of money, property, whatever it is you want. The independence of these external symbols makes you free, and when you're free, your thinking, the quality of your thinking and feeling improves, and if the quality of your thinking and feeling improve, the quality of your acting improves. And don't you see that higher quality acting will lead to prosperity? But if you think the external money is so important, it's not going to happen, because you're a slave to money. You don't have money, money has you. So a truly abundant person can easily let go of money, take money. I say this in my money training on my website. You can easily give and easily take. So we've discussed 3 different ways of moving from desire to belief. One is to simply imagine something you want and imagine already having that. And I may have gone through this too quickly. You may want to take more time. The second way is to imagine a fantasy and then something that is certainty, and then transfer the feeling of certainty to the fantasy. And the third way is to convert something imagined into a memory. And either of these creates relief. In many cases, also a manifestation. The question always arises, do I have to act, or is it enough just to visualize? And my response to that is, well, it's different in each case. Sometimes you're called to act, and sometimes things just manifest. But they don't manifest while you're looking, while you're desiring, wanting, waiting. They manifest when you're no longer waiting, when you've let go, when you no longer desire. It's the whole purpose of letting go. You look elsewhere and suddenly it manifests. That's why it's always good not to get too fixated on one thing and overemphasize one thing in your life. It's a weakness of the ego, the mind, to overemphasize and overfocus, to think all of life is about this. And it's an art to be able to shift attention elsewhere and elsewhere again and elsewhere, and then perhaps later return to this. And I've said this many times in my attention training on my website and my reality creation courses also on my website. If these exercises have helped you, please share this video far and wide.